Hey, we have a quick happiness emergency. So I decided to put this new video together. And emergency might be a bit of an exaggeration, but what this is about is I've had a bunch of my friends sending me this study and all of the reporting around it that is talking about basically money can buy happiness, and that, you maybe have heard about previously. There was this very well-known study that said happiness peaked around 70, well, not peaked, excuse me, at $75,000. The relationship between income and happiness started to level off, basically. Like once you had enough money, you were good. And first of all, that study's often misinterpreted in that you don't adjust for inflation. So that number today is about $112,000. But this new study by Killingsworth and then Kahneman as well, apparently they did this thing that is sort of like, I think there's a term for it, but it's basically when two researchers are debating something and they're on opposite sides, they do like a joint collaborative research project together and see what they find, which I think is actually quite a lovely direction for science to go in. And so now I'm not here to say the study's wrong or something. There's like Nobel Prize winning guy and some brilliant people, and I think it absolutely is valid. But my hesitation, and the reason I'm making this video, is because I think that the way that it is reported, and even the way the data is presented in some sense, while scientifically valid, is a tad misleading in terms of our practical thinking about life. So here's the study I'm talking about. You see these headlines everywhere. There was a Forbes one, I believe, that got a lot of attention, that more money buys more happiness. And what we'll look at here is, let's just start with the way that this data is presented. And I'm going to compare and contrast this and that famous $75,000 number study. So the difference with this research, if we look very closely, right, we see this basically like almost like a linear relationship where your well-being score continues to rise with income. But I just want to draw your attention to what is going on down here with this scale. So what you notice is it goes 15, 30, 60, 120, 240, 480. So it is not the typical absolute scale that we're used to when you think of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40. It's doubling every time. Okay. So when you're looking at here, when you say, oh, I think there's a human tendency, and again, the way it's being reported, to say, well, if I just make a little more money, I'm like right here. And if I just make a little more money and move up there, like I'm going to be happier. Well, that little movement along this axis is actually doubling your income. So I question when you use logarithms sometimes how practical it can be, and saying, yeah, like if you continue to double your income, you get this linear relationship. But let's look at what happens if you do this in absolute terms. And this is not an incredibly advanced measure. I just pulled in a few of the data points they used for each of these values down here and just redid the chart. Okay, so you see, let me go back to this other screen first, is if you, again, just note that pattern. When you don't have an absolute scale, you have this linear relationship. But when you bring these into absolute values, what you see is a bit of a different pattern. So look down here, right? I just had it going up 15,000 every time. And instead of this vertical line, you get something a bit more like a curve. And so what you see there is, yes, happiness does continue to increase with income. But when you're doing it in terms of the absolute income levels, you're saying there's still kind of a point where you're starting to flatten out, maybe somewhere, let's say around there. which would be $150,000. Or even if you look here, remember we said earlier 112 was our inflation adjusted number, right? There's a point where there's a little bit of leveling off. So again, this is not me saying it's wrong, and it's not me saying don't make more money. If you come into work this week and your boss says, hey, you know what, I'd like you to keep working the same amount of hours, but I'm going to double your salary, definitely do not say no to that offer. But my point, when it's presented this way as a logarithm, right, you get this big straight line up. You're like, I just keep making more and more money, I'm going to be happier, happier, happier. Sure. But what it really looks like in absolute terms is there are these diminishing returns for every $5,000 added or every $10,000 added when you aren't doing it in terms of doubling your income over and over and over again. So if you are watching this and you're kind of maybe probably in like, middle class ish, maybe we're making in this 80 to 150 range, my message would be, and I believe there's some research to back this up if you look at some of the work by folks like Kasser, or I believe Dunn has a good paper on this in terms of valuing time versus valuing money, or even just more broadly thinking about other areas you could be investing your time and energy into, aside from trying to continuing to increase your income, is on the margin here, thinking about what's more practical. It's probably not going to be like, oh, should I work a little more and double my income? In real life, it's probably more like, oh, should I work more and slightly increase my income? And this is where this curved pattern comes into play. That's saying that I believe it's likely that there are probably higher return on investment areas to be investing your time and efforts into, again, once you reach that certain level of income. So to wrap up this video, again, I'm not saying their researchers are wrong. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm simply just pointing out this scale question logarithm, and that we're thinking how to make practical use of this knowledge, that the way it's presented can maybe be a little bit impractical when it comes to making real decisions on the margin about what to do to optimize for happiness. So I hope you found this interesting. And of course, you can always let me know what you think. Thanks.